these two pieces of information is to give you some support study, and also for you to be cognizant of why certain things we're saying and what necessitates it to your benefit, even just as you came with your national papers.
Yes.
In other words, to give you more substance as to its importance, its vital importance. And because most people are not aware, thank you, most people are not aware of the truth about modern world politics, contemporary world politics, less more world history for the last couple thousand years. Their concepts are wrong because they've been given what is known as reconstructed history. And not that they're not aware of that, but they're aware of that statement without being aware of the substance contained in that statement. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know how to say aware of something without understanding its construct.
Wow.
Meaning, say, no different than knowing an engine but not knowing how it runs. You know, recognizing an engine, but if you ask them the dynamics or the engineering of they'll start telling you what their beliefs are. Likewise, with how things really run. And of course that's dangerous. And of course that's greatly to our people's disadvantage now, but they very often look at it as a point of interesting information that belongs to some people but not to them.
Right.
Or that it doesn't involve them unless they just happen to be interested in it, when it actually involves everybody.
Okay.
You know, people not having a knowledge of the universal character. And so, as an example, the Incorporation papers, which you'll see with the numbers 1, 4 zeros, and 9 on it, is a degraded copy of the United States Corporation Company that people who don't know better think is a country. So when you're trying to nationalize people or get people conscious of what their birthright is, most of them think it's a belief system and their concepts about everything is totally wrong. Do you understand?
Yes.
And when you tell people some of this information, most of the time they hear it's interesting, but it goes in one ear and out the other. Not knowing that they're not secure, nor are their families secure, and any accounts that they have actually don't belong to them. And even their houses and their cars don't belong to them, but they believe that they do. And they think that's just something that we're talking about, like it's some Moorish information that has nothing to do with them. This is a general concept you find with people all across the country. Nevertheless, this is given to you to give you documented facts so that information makes more sense to you. To also let you understand that this is not unknown information,
Okay.
and that people in positions of authority and power already have this information, including your so-called marching, praying black leader guys who pretend they don't understand that we're under occupation. Their job or their payoff conversation is called racism. Do you understand? In other words, they're paid to project race argument and color argument, knowing that it's a fraud,
Yes. Yes.
to avoid people from finding out this information, which is curative, which means when you understand what's wrong, you're better able to fix things than you are when you're going by beliefs or your feelings or your emotions. And one of the keys to social engineering and controlling people is to promote belief systems distinguished from knowledge, and train them from childhood that belief systems equate to divine knowledge or divine dispensation. And therefore people raise their families and actually guide their lives in the concept that their beliefs constitute a security in divine knowledge.
Yes.
And impose that on the civilized world under the concept that they can compete when in fact they can't compete. And of course trained that when they're rejected in their attempts to compete, that whoever rejects them is racist or prejudiced or don't like their color,
Right.
when actually they're incompetent and they can't read and they don't know themselves and they have no knowledge about a state. They don't even know that they have an estate. But they got a lot of idol gods that they change every couple of years that was given to them by Rome, and they think it's Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, and Muhammad type thing. And you can't tell them any different, because if you try to give them facts, they start thinking that you're a devil or Illuminati type thing. Really, I'm serious.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And so this pretty much protects the dark priesthood, because the people in general don't study. That's number one. They don't read. Number two, they think that beliefs equates knowledge. Number three, they have the mentality of minors, and they're classified as minorities, and they actually think that's an Afrocentric identity. We're talking about adults. And so you have a whole nation of people in general that don't even know what nation is. They don't even know that outside of that venue, you can't even enforce law. That outside of that venue, you have no descendancy right of claim. They don't even know about descendancy. You know what I mean? And they don't know that all rights are lienable without that foundational knowledge. So, Slime, go ahead. So, go ahead, sign in. Go ahead. And so, this is given to you to give you some support in some of the things that we're discussing tonight and at any particular time concerning nationality and politics and the necessity of it. See, because it's like you give people information, but until it becomes actually their own, they look at it as yours. Do you understand? And until people understand that this information is universal in character, they will take it as a sectoral belief system without examination and without support information. And logically, because the knowledge is suppressed knowledge, it is only preserved for people who are in secret societies, and therefore they think it's the devil. I mean, because that's the way they've been trained. And then don't just examine it, not knowing that it is a social engineering mechanism for burying the truth about themselves and their lost estate that they don't even know they have. And so the poverty, the destruction within our communities was all based in this knowledge and or the suppression of it. And so other subject matters are presented to the people as being more important or the real deal type thing. Not that those things aren't relative, because they are. But what it is sort of like getting people fired up and interested in a beautiful building without them understanding that the foundation is not solid or sound. And if the foundation is not sound, in a storm, it will all come down, no matter how beautifully built it is. Likewise with any other social structure, any other engineering, etc. And so, once in a while, it necessitates that when we're talking to people about certain subject matters, that we give them some documentation. And the best way is to give the documentation that the high priests themselves had, or that rulers themselves had, in order to expose the ruler. You can't talk against the rulers. You can't talk against the priesthood. You must expose what the priesthood had and let their own words expose them. Because the people's blind faith is what makes the institutions work. And so the people themselves are the defense mechanism for their own enslavement. And they don't believe it, if you understand. So this is given to you on two fronts to demonstrate to you the real structure of legitimate government distinguished from illegitimate government, or what we call de facto, de jure, true or false, etc. And of course, to make it rational to you, the importance as to why not only must you know this, but it must become a part of you, because it concerns you, and it concerns your family and your children. And so you're talking from this perspective: truth, falsehood. or lie. You can say veracity too. In concern of government at North America, and this is a paper that you're given, right? De jure, de facto. Colloquial, feudal. You know, these are just for starters, and we could add things, you know, to these columns, but these concepts need to be and must be known by you to function in society to any degree of reasonable success. And of course, these keys must be known for you to circumvent some of the things that are established in society for what you call a social engineering suppression under European colonial operations that our people blindly and falsely have been calling racism and prejudice, which is the de facto argument presented by COINTELPRO operatives, people who are paid off within the communities to keep the sheeple from really understanding or being able to successfully overcome the system.
Say sheeple.
Sheeple are people that are really sheep, or what is called chattel, which is a French word for cattle, which in another what is called nom de guerre, and some of the nom de guerre are referred to as Negroes, blacks, coloreds, etc. Distinguished from civilized people who have nationalities. That's how you can easily tell persons who are in the codes, because those persons think that human beings are crayons. They're talking colors as identity when the rest of the civilized world already know that that's Christian property. And they think it's a religion, if you get the point. And so the difficulty is to get people to respect knowledge and to start dealing with facts. And they'll usually lean to their beliefs and continue to protect their beliefs, which are actually designed to enslave them. This is back to what we were talking about earlier. Now, Article 3 is the true secret oath of the entire body of the clergy, known by fact, but not talked about. Are we clear? So when our people are in their communities and they see these expensive buildings in the poorest of communities, at least every 2 or 3 blocks in any direction, and it never dawned on them, how can these grand buildings be supported in these poor communities? Because they're spy centers. They're actually military. Do you understand? But it is never talked about, and never acknowledged. And all things are done what you call by layers. How do you hide the layer of its military origin? By 501c3 documents. Stuff like that. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Now let's read this together. Article 3 of the Secret Treaty of Verona. Convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes, the high contracting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which the clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their own interest, intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of the princes, and the contracting powers join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. The general concept is that they're submitting them to Jesus. And that's their real secret oath. So all the clergy are actually delivering the people to the popes of Rome under the secret treaty of Rome. So you can understand why this is basically called a secret document. Why? Because if the masses knew that, these people would be hanging from the nearest light pole. So the very murderers of the prophets is who they're really worshiping in the name of Jesus. And yet if you said that, just general out your mouth talking to people, they will condemn you to death. You and your children need to go on I-95 at lunch, you're going to hell, fire. That's Illuminati stuff of the devil, masonry crap that y'all made up, attacking God's house. That's the kind of statements you get along that line. And you're actually throwing them a life raft. This is why these people can't get out of the slavery. Because they themselves are funding their own enslavement and don't know it. And they're doing it sincerely. But if you said this without document, they would want to attack you and talk about you're ungodly and a whole bunch of other things, wouldn't they? That's the record. That is what? Read the top of it. Secret Treaty of Rome, American Diplomatic Code, 1778-1884, Volume 2, Elliott, page 179. It's in the congressional records. So all congressmen know that, all politicians know that, and all these marching, praying, keep hope alive, Masonic preachers know this while pretending they don't know what that fez is that they're wearing. And then people will turn around and defend them if you give them this truth. But that's that Moorish stuff. You know, like it's alien, because they don't even recognize their own bloodline. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then they get in debates about it when it's not even debatable. And so this information is given to you to give you support to understand that people around you already have this information. They're already aware. But they're dedicated by oath not to reveal these secrets, because if these secrets are known, logically, the institutions will collapse. Why? Because they live off the poor. The poor actually fund their own enslavement while starting other organizations to deal with the symptoms of their poverty, which increases the poverty. It's sort of like, to stop the bleeding in this arm, they cut this vein. As a scenario. And because they don't understand birthright, they talk about racism because that's what they told the problem is, but no one told them race is the human species. They don't even know language. Do you understand? But yet, that death mentality is ingrained in our community. This is why it's hard or difficult to fix these things. And of course, if you come with facts, they're going to start telling you about what their beliefs are. And challenging, you don't know godness and all that kind of stuff. And they shut down. Meanwhile, they fund a whole bunch of organizations to deal with the symptoms. Of course, it never gets fixed. And as the generations get, ascend or descend, as the generations descend, they lose reference points more and more and more. That's why the youth are dying younger and younger with no recourse. It's a sign of nature telling us that we're about to be made extinct if we don't fix this thing. But of course, we have been trained to think it's the devil did it, don't we? No, it's the black codes. It's a genocide program that's been running under the doctrine of discovery for generations, and we've been diverted into arguing other things that have nothing to do with what's really going on. Therefore, we put up no defense to the attack. Matter of fact, we support the institutions that initiate the attack. So, let's go over the document that you have called Democracy. As you can see, it's Republic Truth versus Democracy Fraud. Now, most of our people, anyone that has any questions, you'll pass the mic around, when someone has a question. Now, any one of you take the opportunity to read maybe a section of the page and then pass it on to the next person to read, so that we're not just reading it loosely, that it becomes a part of your thought process. But George, do us a favor, read the first part of the page, and then feel free, if you, after we complete the reading, to interject. What do you see in it? What do you recognize? All right?
Can I go back to the part, how did we come out of this, Todd? I think I'm moving the bathroom for something. You said you killing ourselves. How do we remedy that?
You're here for that purpose.
Okay.
Just like when you come to the House of Reawakening Minds, this venue that Dr. Naila Gilliam set up is a purging. It's actually a baptism. Just like, say, for instance, like people look at baptism from the ritual. All right, we can do the ritual. If we're dealing with dogmata, you do the ritual, you throw people in the pool, half drown them, throw water on them, and they think they're saved, and that's called a baptism. It's not wrong. Do you understand? That's not wrong. It is a ritual to demonstrate or to symbolize that which is supposed to be done internally. The true baptism is to be reborn with a new mind. That means the bull crap must be washed out of your mind, and you must be replenished with truth. And it's not always beautiful, but it washes away the fiction. It unplugs you from a false matrix or false womb or false mother and shows you your real mother. This is called birthright or nativity. And so that nativity brings you back to the manger of your pineal gland, to your first birth, your primogenitorship, thus your inheritance, as demonstrated in gene or genetics, what's called in the book of Genesis, in the theft of the birthright, or the sale of the birthright for a bowl of red pottage. These are Kabbalistic stories that's telling you about the theft of your birthright, or even you giving up your birthright. And so if you don't know the Kabbalistic origin of those books, you're looking at it as real stories of individuals, when it's actually, that's a fictional demonstration. You see the point? And so this is why the priesthood will never tell the people that those books are Kabbalistic, because the people are caught up in the personalities that are actually prepared for children. But in that nature, fictitious. Do you understand? But the stories have real character for development to them. Do you understand? Purpose. They're not to be dismissed. Because they're stories about yourself, not really outside yourself. But anyway, go ahead, Brother George.
I'm starting at
You'll start Republic Truth versus Democracy Fraud. We're going to read the whole pamphlet, and then we're going to go over it, and then feel free. Then we're going to loosely go over the first and second page of the Incorporation papers, and you put it together in your mind. Then I'm going to go into House Joint Resolution 192, into certain statements that have been made on the floor of the Congress, to put us in the frame of mind of understanding the foundation of the politics that are going on. And I might go a little bit maybe into the Clearfield Doctrine to give you some legal dispensations by the Supreme Court, so that our concepts can be corrected on what we must do as a countermeasure. And also it becomes, obvious that the average person needs to act in areas that they're not aware that they need to act in, and not to be active is an acquiescence, and that it sets them up for destruction. But not knowing this information logically does not put them on guard, because they don't know war is being waged against them. They think there's people out there that like us and some don't, and there's prejudice and races. And that's a convenient and distorted concept when they're actually enforcing the doctrine of discovery upon all the people. And the race argument is given out there as an engineering diversion, because the people gotta let off steam. Do you understand? It's sort of like having people debate about the needle that somebody's threatening you with Meanwhile, you're really being stabbed in the back with a dagger, and you're arguing the needle. Yeah, because what they did with black people is stick pins in them. And they got all these stab wounds in their back that they're being diverted from, which is going to take their life. And you can't tell them no different because they got Jesus and God and Allah and everything and Muhammad and swear that they're saved. Meanwhile, the evidence is the youth are dying younger and younger on the street. Families are falling apart. You know what I mean? There's no solid, very few, if any, left of any sound families. It's either women with children by themselves or men with children by themselves, but they're rarely together. From the Christian black codes that they support and pay for, but won't acknowledge because they're claiming to be Christians. So they won't admit their own suffering origin. Do you understand? It's so much, they've been compromised. And then won't admit it. This is given to you, particularly Article 3, to let you understand what is on the mind of all these evangelists you see on TVs and why they asking for $60 million planes without a conscience. They're ameliorating their own interest. They're already charged with that from day one. And these people think they're submitting them to Jesus. They're submitting them to the popes of Rome under the secret treaty of Rome, documented, which means it's not secret. But people who don't read ain't into knowledge. They're into beliefs. Therefore, they're subject to every trick that comes down the pike. Meanwhile, they feel sorry for themselves, but the civilized world don't feel sorry for them because the whole world knows this. And so the whole world's not going to sit around and argue with people who think that human beings are crayons and tell them about birthright when they don't want to hear it. So if they come in those communities, they already have a setup where they're already instructed to stop at the hardware store, get a thick piece of plexiglass, go into the zoo, and if you can last 2 years, you will come out wealthy. Don't usually stay too long because you may not survive it, and then you just sell it to another national that comes in and does the same thing from generation to generation, and these dummies, cattle, haven't caught on yet. But they got all these beliefs that don't work, but they won't render them unto Caesars, from whom they got it, and they keep lying on Jesus and Allah and Muhammad and saying they set this up when they have absolutely nothing to do with this stuff. And you can't tell them anything different either. So rather than argue with people, give them documents. Then give them the argument. You see the point? Well, go ahead, George.
The following law definitions are presented word for word, firmly discerning and denoting the distinction made between the constitutionally sanctioned republic versus the colorable imposed democracy, which has been contemporarily propagated by questionable, plausible, and less than loyal politicians, military officers, social engineers, and school teachers, etc., for the verification of their criminality. See the United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 4. These official excerpts are derived from the Soldier Training Manual, TM 2000, as issued under the authority of the government by the War Department of the United States Republic, North America, dated November 30th, 1928. The reader is advised to be cognizant of the supreme law of the land, Constitution, when reading, analyzing, and considering the serious social and political violations and ramifications involved in the exposure of this military information. Also keep in mind the following law-binding facts concerning the official oath of the Commander-in-Chief President. Every soldiers who enlist, and any soldiers who are drafted in any branch of the military service under the authority of or under the jurisdiction of the United States Republic. The following is an excerpt from the solemn oath as taken by the law by all military personnel. I swear or affirm to defend the United States and the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Go ahead, continue. If you feel, make sure that your thoughts are complete.
If you fold it like this,
It's a trifold.
it's a trifold like this, but.
It's actually a trifold, yeah, so
Yeah.
put it that way.
Like this. So that inside page is the next page. United States Constitution.
Yes,
Make it 10.
yes.
United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 4. Section 4, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of legislator or the executive when the legislator cannot be convened against domestic violence.
All right, good brother, take the next part, and then pass it right on back. Now, this is derived from the Soldier's Training Manual. So this means for you to understand that military already understand their obligation, and keep in mind they have that same oath, right? And you already know, when you learn civics in the 3rd grade, the president has both what you call a public and a civilian office. That's the only office, that executive. He is both civilian and public. And that commander-in-chief, and he operates the public office. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Of the nation, you see. All right, go ahead, good brother.
The Soldier's Training Manual, TM 2000, United States War Department, November 30th, 1928. TM 2000-25, 118-120, Democracy. A government of the masses, authority derived from masses meeting, or any other form of direct expression, result in mobocracy, attitude toward property is communistic, negating property rights. Attitude toward law is that the will of majority shall regulate, whether it be based upon deliberation or government by passion, prejudice, and impulse without restraint or regard to consequences, result in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, anarchy.
Continue.
TM 2000-25, 120, 121, Republic. Authority is derived through the election by the people of the public officials best fitted to represent them. Attitude toward property is respect for laws and individual rights, and a sensible economic procedure. Attitude toward law is the administration of justice in accord with fixed principles and established evidence, with strict regard to consequences. A greater number of citizens and extent of territory may be brought within its compass. Avoid the dangerous extreme of either tyranny or mobocracy. Result in statesmanship, liberty, reason, justice, contentment, and progress.
Go ahead, read, sis.
Ancillary definitions. Mobocracy, government by a mob. The mob as a ruling body. Oxford University Dictionary, 1933. The legal definitions of treason. Excerpted from TLC.
H.C. Blacks.
Black's Law Dictionary. Definitions of the terms and phrases of American and English jurisprudence. Ancient and modern. Revised 4th edition, West Publishing Company, 1968, and from the Oxford University Dictionary, 1933, and from Britannica World Language Dictionary, 1965. Treason is the offense of attempting by overt acts to overthrow the government of the state to which the offender owes allegiance or betraying the state into the hands of a foreign power. Treason consists of two elements: adherence to the enemy and rendering him aid and comfort. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or adhering to their enemies.
All right. Now, the rest you can read in your spare time. Now, I want you all to feel free with what you just have so far and take the position of instructor to ourselves. You want to read some, brother? Yeah. Go ahead.
Misprison of treason. 1A. A contempt against the sovereign, the government, or the courts of justice, including not only contempts of court, properly so called, but also all forms of seditious or seditious or disloyal conduct and lèse majesty. 2. Maladministration of high public office, including peculation of the public funds. 3. A neglect of light account made of a crime, that is failure in the duty of a citizen to endeavor to prevent the commission of a crime, or having knowledge of its commission, to reveal it to the proper authorities, and the concealment of something which ought to be revealed. Black's Law Dictionary. Treason, the act of betrayal, or the trust undertaken or reposed in anyone, a breach of faith, treachery, a violation by a subject of his allegiance to his sovereign or to the state. Misprison, Oxford Universal Dictionary. Treason is betrayal, treason is treachery or breach of allegiance or of obedience toward the sovereign or the government. Treason against the United States is declared by the Constitution, Article 3, Section 3, to, quote, consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort, end quote. Treason is also a breach of faith, treachery. See synonyms under fraud, and this is coming from Britannica World Language Dictionary. Furthermore, fraud is an intentional perversion of truth for the purpose of inducing another in reliance upon it, being fraud, to part with some valuable thing belonging to him, or to surrender a legal right. Fraud is also a false representation of a matter of fact, whether by words or by conduct, by false or misleading allegations, or by concealment of that which should have been disclosed. Fraud which deceives and is intended to deceive another so that he shall act upon it to his legal injury. Fraud is a generic term embracing all multifarious means which human ingenuity can devise and which are resorted to by one individual to get the advantage over another by false suggestions or by suppression of truth. And fraud includes all surprise, trick, cunning, dissembling, and any other unfair way by which another is cheated, quote unquote, bad faith, end quote, and fraud are synonymous and also synonyms of dishonesty, infidelity, faithlessness, perfidy, unfairness, etc., or etc., and consist of some deceitful practice or willful device resorted to with the intent to deprive another of his right or in some manner to do him an injury, as distinguished from negligence. It is always positive and intentional. And this is coming from Black's Law Dictionary. Furthermore, crime Crime is a positive or negative act in violation of penal law. An offense against the state, quote-unquote, crime and quote-unquote misdemeanor, properly speaking, are synonymous terms. Though in the common usage, quote-unquote, crime is made to denote such offenses as are of a deeper and more atrocious dye. Crimes are those wrongs which the government notices as injuries to the public and punishes in what is called a quote-unquote criminal proceeding in its own name. A crime may be defined to be any act done in violation of those duties which an individual owes to the community, and for the breach of which the law has provided that the offender shall make satisfaction to the public. A crime, a crime or public offense is an act committed or omitted in violation of a law forbidding or commanding it, and to which it is annexed upon conviction either of the following punishments: 1, death; 2, imprisonment; 3, fine; 4, removal from office; 5, disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit in this state. Should I continue?
Now, D,
A crime or misdemeanor shall consist in a violation of the public law in the commission of which there shall be a union of quote-unquote act and quote-unquote intention or criminal negligence. Black's Law Dictionary. Foreign. Foreign is belonging to another nation or country, belonging or attached to another jurisdiction, made, done, or rendered in another state or jurisdiction, subject to another jurisdiction. Foreign is operating on solvable in another territory. Foreign is extrinsic, outside, extraordinary, non-resident. As to foreign, quote-unquote, administrator, quote-unquote, assignment, quote-unquote, attachment, quote-unquote, bill of exchange, quote-unquote, charity, quote-unquote, commerce, quote-unquote, corporation, quote-unquote, county, quote-unquote, creditor, quote-unquote, divorce, quote-unquote, document, quote-unquote, domicile, quote-unquote, factor, quote-unquote, judgment, quote-unquote, jury, quote-unquote, minister, quote-unquote, plea, quote-unquote, port, quote-unquote, quote, state, quote-unquote, vessel, and quote-unquote, voyage. See those titles, Black's Law Dictionary. Domestic. Domestic is pertaining to, belonging, or relating to a home, a domicile, or to the place of birth. Birth, origin, creation, or transaction. As to domestic and quote-unquote administrators, quote-unquote assignments, quote-unquote attachments, quote-unquote bill of exchange, quote-unquote commerce, quote-unquote corporations, quote-unquote creditors, quote-unquote factors, quote-unquote fixtures, quote-unquote judgment, and quote-unquote manufacturer. See these titles, Black's Law Dictionary. Compliments and Moore's Orders of the Roundtable, MAHS, Taj Tarik Bey, in association with R.B. Bey Publishing, Northwest of Mexico, Northwest Africa, North America, the North Gate. The following are excerpts from the book, A History of the United States by Harry Williams of Louisiana State University, Richard N. Current, University of Wisconsin, and Frank Friedel, I guess, Harvard University, second edition, printed 1965. The Republican Party in each southern state rested on the basis of the Negro voters, page 23. Republican power in the South depended on three supports: the Negro vote, Republican control of the national government, and particularly of the presidency, and the presence of federal troops in the South. Page 25. Reconstruction was the transforming changes that occurred in the entire nation between 1865 and 1877, the year when Southern whites overthrew the last Republican state governments in their section and ended political reconstruction. Page 7. All attempts of the rich whites to dominate the Negro vote failed, and finally the promoters joined the general white opposition to the radical reconstruction. Page 24. By one method or another, legal or illegal, every white man was to be forced to join the Democratic Party or leave the community. By similar methods, every Negro male was to be excluded from political action. In a few states, he was permitted to vote if he voted Democratic. Page 28. Lincoln's proclamation asked the South to recognize the reality that slavery was dead, but it did not require that a state formally abolish slavery as an institution. Page 12. The Black Codes were the South's solution for the problem of the Negro laborer and its substitute for slavery as a white supremacy device. Page 6. Some states passed their laws for the specific purpose of forcing the Negroes back to the plantations and farms. Socially, the codes were designed to govern relations between the races, to define the position of the former slaves in the Southern society, and to invest in Negroes with a recognized and legal, although subordinate status. Page 16. Those who contended that education and economic progress was inadequate and advocated more militant methods expressed themselves through a somewhat loose organization known as the quote-unquote the Niagara Movement. But in 1909, after a race riot in Springfield, Illinois, they came together to establish the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Although most of the officers of the new society were whites, the guiding spirit was W.E.B. Du Bois, page 445. That European daughter in Washington, where she said, she was the head of the NAACP and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And she said the right thing. She said, "I'm black." When they asked her was she African American, she never answered that, but when she said, "I am black," which was a truth,
Because she is.
Yes, because she is black.
Now, and this is back to the issue of because people can't read or people have been miseducated does not make them right because they have accepted a false paradigm. Why is that? And what is the answer? When she said that she was black, she was telling the truth. What was she saying? What was she saying?
That she was pale.
Exactly. Because that's what black means.
Bleached, pale.
It means shining pale.
29% black blood?
And there's no such thing as black blood. See, in other words, that's the false paradigm. But then that's the false matrix, as you see what has been done for control purposes. Now, in law, say in a community, that argument would be accepted, right? If that argument was taken before the United Nations or before civilized people, the delegates would get up and walk away just like they did on Ralph Bunche when he went to the United Nations to talk about Negroes. In other words, it's the Dred Scott issue. But yet, if people don't have a knowledge of how things really work, they would take it emotionally, they would take it as being abused, rejected, when actually the world's not responsible for their dishonor to their mothers and fathers. And the truth needs no apology. Do you understand? For instance, let me say this, and then let's just share. It is a known fact that 90% of the people that are party members to the NAACP, right? National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, don't know that colored means artificial persons. That's number one. However, the world holds them to that. Because these are the same people that got these buildings on every other corner talking about they know Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, when the Nibiru was coming through from the dark side of the moon. You understand what I'm saying? The ancient black gods of Egypt and all these kind of things, and Hotep and all this kind of stuff. Know when God's going to kick the devil's butt and don't know themselves. The world's not responsible to that. They are. Because every man, woman, and child on this planet is required to honor their mothers and fathers for international law to protect them. And those who do not honor their mothers and fathers are held outside of human society and are classified as outlaws. Now that's number one. And these same people that have been supporting these so-called Negro marching organizations, including the NAACP, if presented with a fair argument to tell the history, 90% of them don't know anything about the Niagara movement, from which that movement, under the acts of subversion, was derived and neutralized. And if you ask them about the Niagara movement, they look at you with crossed eyes. And then if you ask them who's been running the NAACP, they'd be talking about their black leader guys, and they'd be talking about the truth, but not the truth the way they think they're talking about it. Because they're talking about some Hasidic European so-called Jews who've been running it ever since for their property under the Christian black codes. And the charter was made and restructured so that they could never own property. And they've been funding all of this for generations and putting it on their babies to their own destruction, and then feeling sorry for themselves. Well, the world don't feel sorry for them because they claim to know Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, and Muhammad. And they're always boasting about their spirituality that isn't real.
So you mean like the 40 acres and the mule was,
Even that the 3830 parallel, they don't even know the history of it. Meaning they talk about 40 acres and the mules, and you ask them about the law that involves with the 3830 parallel, etc., including the Missouri Compromise, the Dred Scott case, and the status of the issue of status, and the repopulation of the people between the Allegheny and the Rocky Mountains, and they look at you with cross eyes because they don't know that part of the history because they don't read, they don't study. And they bought into the black diaspora that they came from someplace else, therefore they don't recognize that they're even the people of the land. And so they're incompetent. Meanwhile, they're always self-righteous, and they're always judging other people. So the civilized world is not going to sit around and feel sorry for such people who are arrogant in their ignorance. But they make demands on the civilized world while they are the ones who are in dishonor. They're going around calling human beings crayons. And then wondering why they're not accepted by the civilized world. Because they're trying to make a fiction that they know is a fiction, real, and put it on the civilized world, get rejected. And then they want international law to protect them when the laws of nations is for people who recognize their nativity and respect nationhood. Because that's where the laws come from. So nation and international law does not protect a people who are not of a nation, who dishonor their nativity or their nationality. However, rather than take responsibility, they attack the civilized world for rejecting them, for rejecting civilization. But continue. But I just want to drop that because those are facts. However, you know and I know that those general facts are not dispensed amongst most of these people in these different alphabet soup organizations by the leaders, even though they had this information and have been charged by the international community to dispense this information to these people at all costs. Under Universal Proclamation of Human Rights of 1948, Rights of the Child 1959, Treaty Enforcement under the Clinton administration of 93, and the Rights of Indigenous People as signed by Barack Obama, all of which commanding these people to declare their nationality. But continue.
It's, my question just had to do with the woman, the issue of the woman who said that she ran the NAACP and that she was black. We understand what black really means, you know, from a standpoint
yes.
of being bleached. But do you feel that she actually knew that when she made that statement, or was she
Yes.
saying it from the knowledge, knowing
She
it?
was defending herself etymologically, truthfully, even though she's aware that most people didn't know what the hell she
So
was
she
talking
knew,
about.
and that's my question.
Yes.
Was she doing it with knowledge, or was she doing it out of
This
ignorance?
is what she's doing. She's doing it because she knows the whole issue is a false flag, for number one. That is a diversion from these people because they're getting ready to crash these people's bank accounts, which we've been talking about 2748 for these years. And that they're going to be out of JOBs, and half of them are going to be on the curb if it's up to the banksters. This is a diversion. This whole issue with her, number one, is a false flag. But we're only talking about it from the point of its real interest. But real scholars already know that's a diversion and wouldn't even pay attention to it. You know, just like, and then they catch you with it right type thing. In other words, these things are false flags. Just like what took place in Baltimore, false flag. Took place in Ferguson, false flag. The civilized world knows it. The only people who don't know it is us who keep responding to it wrongly.
How do you let her perpetuate the situation that, she's in, she was, a person of color? How did they let that happen?
All right, now, stop.
Without doing
Now,
a
slow down.
background?
Wait, slow down.
Because she could have been a terrorist.
Slow down. Slow down. I'm going to come back to this. Give him the mic. Come over here just a minute.
You hit it down, who you calling, him or me?
Both of you, as a matter of fact.
I'm just-
They just sitting there chilling.
Join the
I want
class.
him to read this for himself.
Yes.
See, this is again, when the Europeans talk about, don't worry about their children. Don't worry about their children.
Whose children, theirs or ours?
This is Europeans talking about people who are branded,
Okay,
or what is called black code property.
all right.
They will never compete because they can't read. And the ones who can, won't. They don't deal with facts. They deal with beliefs only. How do we know? Because we trained them, just like other rats. And they're called sheeple. And the overseers are called shepherds. And they are the flock under Christian black codes. It's never been a secret. It's that they won't accept the facts. And the world knows this.
But it's not just
You-
Christianity, it's also
It's
Islam,
across the
it's-
board.
it's-
Dogmata
Dogmata.
distinguished from religion. All right, now, here we go. Keys, what we was discussing earlier, by the qualifications in the pages, when people start off assuming things to be what they are not. And when you're dispensing information, knowing that people have not been trained in fundamental third grade etymology, you know they can't read already, but you already also know that their ego is in front. Their vanity is in front. And they can't accept that they've been trained because they even think they're spiritual. You understand what I'm saying to you?
Yes.
And so they'll get sensitive if you give them facts and debate with them. You don't debate with them, you give them knowledge. But give it from the source of those who are ruling them because they will accuse you of making things up. Do you understand? Because they will defend their own enslavement. It's like Harry Tubman said, one of the most difficult things to do is to liberate or free a slave that don't know they're slaves. You know, and people use those statements or quotes in that type of relationship very often and never assign it to themselves. Which is understandable, you know, because our concepts are wrong. However, and nonetheless, the civilized world does not have the time or the patience to deal with us. Can you read this, please, good brother?
Which one do you want me to read?
Color, and then I'm going to read color person. Then you break it down in law. Now, this is facts. Now, remember when we talked about the General Education Board?
You mean color in the parents?
Go ahead, read it. This is law, yes.
A colonial law?
This
America,
is law. This is ancient and modern jurisprudence.
In America, this term designates the
This is ancient and modern jurisprudence.
He's reading from colonial law. He needs to start at color.
Color.
Okay, color. An appearance, semblance, assimilation, or symptom, as distinguished from that which is real, a prima facie or apparent right, hence a deceptive appearance, a false,
Plausible.
plausible, assembled exterior,
Assumed.
assumed exterior, conceal a lack of reality, and disguise or
Pretext. Now,
railroad.
yeah, that's just giving you some court cases, because these are stare decisis cases that used here and all around the world when it comes to things in relationship to words and legal phrases, ancient and modern, that is not taught to our people, because basically
Where's this text coming from?
this is Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, ancient and modern jurisprudence, that all scholars have, and all people in law have, all people in government have, all black leaders have, but the masses don't get, because the masses get what you call controlled information. Educated people deal with this information. Uneducated people deal with beliefs. Now, color, read that please. Law.
Colored. By common usage in America, this term is such phrases as colored persons, colored race, colored man,
Quote unquote colored persons.
quote unquote colored persons, or colored man, and the like is used to designate Negroes or persons of the African race, including all persons of mixed blood, descended from Negro ancestry.
Get the law case and go on to keep on with the subject matter. But where?
Cold pieces,
Yeah.
young poles with
But where a state constitution provided for separate.
But where a state constitution provided for separate schools for the white and colored races in turn,
And understand their terms. Quote unquote.
the quote unquote white race which held to be limited to the Caucasian race, and the term colored
Quote unquote.
unquote colored races to embrace all other races, rights versus
Yeah, skip the law case. Keep
It
on with the
has
subject.
been held that there is no legal technical signification to the phrase colored,
Quote
quote
unquote.
unquote colored persons, which the courts are bound judicially to know.
It means people under those brands aren't even legally recognized, because there's no legal, scientific, or real technical signification to those phrases, because they're brand systems. And our people have been told that that means some kind of Afrocentric, uplifting acknowledgement of the purity and greatness of the spirituality of the hotepness of the black people of Kemet. Shit.
And peanut butter sandwiches.
Now, and it's true. And we keep talking with this assurity, and the civilized world is looking at us like we're out to damn lunch, because we absolutely are. But they also know we like to fight, and we're judgmental. And we think that we know Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, and nobody else does, and Jesus only made us. And we're spiritual, and the rest of the world don't understand the activation of the pineal gland of the whole techness of two pyramids. And the rest of the civilized world, logically, is not going to sit around and keep playing with us. So what do? They recognize their mothers and their fathers. They know that human beings are not crayons, and they know that color means artificial. And we keep taking it as an identity and trying to impose that on the civilized world, get rejected, and then accuse them of racism, which is the human species. Because we can't damn read. And too arrogant to learn or to study. But we're going to tell you about gods that we can't see, and don't know our brothers and sisters or love them who stand before us by the day. Know not what is before us in the communities, but we're going to talk about the dark side of the moon and the mirror. But the grays are really got a base on the dark side of the moon. And you know, we're always going there. Not that whether it is or not, it's not important. Not that it's not important. We're more interested in,
You know, behind Venus, you know, that asteroid that they really thought is an asteroid is really a spaceship, and NASA got some hidden pictures of really even the statues on Mars. We can't even get across town without getting profiled. Do you understand what I'm saying? And they won't deal with that. And it conjoins with the divine instructional principle that's in Septuaginta in the Bible, where it says, how say thee that you love a God that you do not see, and love not your brothers and sisters whom you see every day? Likewise, how can you claim a knowledge of something outside of your view when you won't even acknowledge that which is before you? And they must honor their mothers and their fathers, that their days must be longer on this earth, not on some cloud, like every other civilized being. But they don't want to honor their mothers and fathers. They want to be colored, and that's property. Means fake people. Then they want to put that on the civilized world and talk about it as an Afrocentric identity, and they ain't figured out yet why the delegates got up when Ralph Bunche went before the United Nations talking about colored people and people of color and Negroes and Negro rights and with the rest of the civilized world, and now they're racist. They weren't going to even deal with the bullshit. Excuse my expression, but we don't see it that way when we don't know what's going on. But the world's responsibility is not to tell us this. It's your leader, guys, that you keep paying, claiming the houses of God and houses of civics in your communities that you've been giving them $3,000 suits in them parishes for all these years that have been instructed by the civilized world to tell you this stuff. And it's been delivered to them. And you've been betrayed. And we're too arrogant to admit that we don't know or that we've been betrayed, and we keep funding our own enslavement. And then crying the blues and starting multiple alphabet soup organizations to deal with the symptoms because everybody wants to deny the root of the problem as if we're innocent. When every man, woman, and child must confess their own. And we refuse to, but we want the benefit. Pull out an ordinary dictionary.
Thank you, sir. I'm giving you I appreciate you.
Yeah, just concept. I just wanted to see. So, yeah, but I'm just saying, it's concept. But I'm saying when you read it yourself, it can't be charged with someone's opinion. But it also lets you know what the world already knows about us. And then we have people running around perpetrating a fraud with people who can't read, don't know better. Do you understand what I'm saying? And they think they're making a legitimate argument. And their argument is not only illegitimate, it's absolutely fraud and accepted on its face for exactly what it is. Concealing a lack of reality, but asking for the benefit of reality. Well, they're in a false matrix, and they're treated accordingly.
I was there reading. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, family. You understand?
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. I just stopped you, letting a little support to my friend.
Yeah, but anyway, I just wanted to make that point to you. Some of the things that we're talking about is taking people to the reality, because until the people start dealing with the reality, they cannot bring any cure. Until they humble themselves and turn their hearts back to their mothers and fathers, they're not going to get the inheritance no matter what kind of organization they set up or what kind of claims they make. The sooner we get to that point, the sooner we can begin to save the children that we keep on fakedly claiming that we love. Let's save the children, self-esteem and all that kind of crap. Real quick.
So, going back to what you said before in the past.
Anyway, thank you too, brother, for coming through.
Thank you. Peace.
Yes.
I'll talk to you.
Belief, faith, fruition.
Yes.
We're missing that last part.
It's exactly. And then too arrogant to accept that we've been played, and then again too arrogant to no, I want you to come up. Too arrogant to accept that either we don't know or that we've been participating in our own enslavement. Go ahead.
What am I looking up?
What you wanted to show me.
All right. So when we was talking about black earlier, and black meaning pale, I've got an app here on my iPad. If you got an Apple, you can download it. It's dictionary.com. But the reason why I like it is because dictionary.com actually gives you the origin and history, which is etymology of the word. And you can look at it plain as day. It says OE, which is Old English. Blake.
Old English. Now let's slow down. This is how we read. What is the first thing we do? Because remember,
Oh, yeah, for
teachers
the part of
do
speech. You're right.
you
you're
got to put the number on it. So Old English or even Middle English, right?
right. Mhm.
So if it's Middle English and derived from Old English or Old High German, then you must put a date on each one of them. This is why they say our people can't read. So immediately a scholar knows that etymologically, and in fact, it can't be ancient. So you can't be talking about some ancient black gods of Egypt, because you must put the timeline on it. So if you're saying Middle English, you know 1100, 1500, right? Old English, you go to Appendix, do the same thing. Old High German, you do the same thing. And it tells you its origin. That means that's when the word began on the planet. You see the whole point? And so that's just like people trying to sit up here and just discuss, well, you know, if it wasn't for George Washington, you know, before he crossed the river near Trenton, New Jersey, if he hadn't hid behind a tree, got on his cell phone, if it had ran out of charge, he wouldn't have been able to call Lafayette and find out where the river was narrow, where he could cross the river near Trenton. And it was deep. And probability he didn't have a cell phone. Not that that technology didn't really exist before then, but according to the truthful record, the fallback or the degradation, the higher technologies were not being used.
Right.
And Georgie didn't have a cell phone.